Hi, welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther, and today I'm going to talk about the third part of the series of my Winter Sowing 101 series, and I'm going to talk about what jugs worked best for me last year in my winter sowing process, what containers worked well, and I'm going to talk about some containers others have used that I'm not as familiar with, but you could try if you want, as well as containers you should definitely avoid. All right, so let's get and at the end of this video, if you stick around, I'll give some tips on places to find the containers for sourcing them if you haven't been saving them up already. All right, so let's get started. So first container I'm going to talk about are your simple 1 gallon milk jugs or water jugs, right? Your water bottles. These honestly are the perfect container for this, for winter sowing. What you need to know is they need to be, for a container to be okay, it needs to be slightly transparent, and that means you can see the light. See how you can see my hand through it? You can see the light through it, which means the sun will be able to get into the jug and will be able to keep your seedlings warm once they start growing. But you can also do half gallons or 2 liters or 1.89 liter containers. Excuse me, this is one I used last year. And I have a bit of tape on it still, but you can use something like this as well. And it works just as good. And sometimes if you only need like 1 or 2 plants of a certain type of variety, this is easier because then you're not wasting a lot of soil for that. All right, you can also use soda bottles. So this is one I had last year, and the nice thing about this one, excuse the fact that it's already been cut, but the nice thing about this one is see how it's just flat all the way down to the bottom. And that's really important because when you go to take your soil out, when you go to take the seedlings out at the end of the year, and you're reaching in with a spoon or with your hands, or you're trying to dump the whole set out on your hands, the fact that it's a flat surface all the way around means that the soil is already evenly packed and you don't have to get around any weird shapes. And I'll show you what I mean. Oh, where did it go? There it is. The other type of soda bottle you can use, but I would prefer to use the other one, but you can use this, is another 2 liter bottle. But here, see how it has this curve? That means, like I said, that when you go to get your soil out, there's going to be this weird curve that you have to get the soil around, get your seedlings out around. And I ended up, the reason this one isn't cut is because all of the ones I use of this type that have this curve, I ended up having to throw away because I ended up having to cut all the way around to easily get my seedlings out for transplant last year. So this you can use because it is transparent, right? Even though it's green, green's just fine as long as it's transparent. But the fact that it's curved is a little bit problematic. Not a deal killer or whatever, deal breaker or whatever, but you just want to be, if you have the choice for the other one, I would recommend that. You can also try, I haven't personally used, I was going to, but then I had plenty of the other kinds, but you can also use things like pretzel jars. Now, what I would recommend for something like this is, when you're winter sowing, you're going to have the cap off, and you need like a small hole for the rain to get in and the snow to get in. But you don't want to have it so big that the critters like squirrels or mice or whatever, well, mice could probably get in through this, but a squirrel could get in and kind of dig up and ruin your seedlings. So if you were to use something like this, you could put holes in the top here so that the water could still get in, or you could flip it upside down, put holes here because it is this nice little sort of catch-all space that would help the water collect at the bottom. And so you could use something like this, and it's nice and tall for the seedlings. And that gets me to containers that other people, oh, and I'm missing one. Another container that works well is like your green tea or sweet tea bottles or juice bottles that you get at the store, right? They work really well. They're see-through. And if you cut them like before they start changing in shape, then you have like the perfect size container for getting your seedlings out of. So this kind of a container works really great, and I'm definitely going to use this. All right, now to containers that I haven't used but others have. So this is all I have. This is my actual salad container that has actual stuff in it from the fridge, but I grabbed it because a lot of people like to use salad containers for their seedlings. And they tend to use the bigger ones that are a little bit taller. The challenge with this is, one, even if it is a little bit taller, you may not have enough headroom for the seedlings to easily grow to the height they need to before you transplant them. Now, if you're planning on just doing like mini lettuces or something, you could do that. You could use something like this. The other thing is the lettuce containers, you know, the ones that have the cuts all along the side, like the holes all along the side. While that's good because your container will drain properly, it also sometimes means that those containers end up drying out faster and also tend to get cold a little faster than the other containers I outlined, at least I've heard. And so you can use this kind of a container, but it will take a little bit more work to maintain on the other end. And I'm all about doing what's easiest, so that's why I recommended the ones I did. Some people also use like storage bins, and they will put solo cups inside, and then they will just poke holes in the top of the storage bins. You could try that. I think that might work better in areas that don't have deep freezes, where you're not worried about having some sort of thicker insulation of like a whole bunch of soil to kind of, and also the keeping it warm process. So that might work in areas like 8 through 10, I would think. But I have found this process works so well with the ones that I know, using things like milk jugs and water jugs and soda bottles, that I'm just not going to mess with it, because why mess with what has worked for me? All right. So now let's get to one container you absolutely should not use. And I'm just using this as an example. You absolutely do not use opaque bottles. See? This one. My peanut oil bottle. You would not use something like this. And the reason you don't use something like this is the sun cannot get through, and therefore your container will not get warm enough for when the seedlings do grow to have that nice greenhouse, hothouse effect that you want to have in your winter sowing process. Keep these for some other purpose if you want to reuse them, but do not use the non-see-through containers. It's okay if they're green and brown and cloudy like these, but if you can't see the sun, you remember how I could see my hand before through the container? You definitely can't see the hand through this one. And the oil's down to here, so it's not because of that. So I hope that helps. All right, now I'm going to talk really quick about some places that I got my containers from. One, obviously, you can save them as you use them. Two, you can ask family or friends. My dad uses mostly purified water, or no, my mom uses purified water for her CPAP machine, and she uses, goes through so much. So they just saved them up for me all year, and then they gave them to me, and I had more than I needed last year. So you can ask family and friends, or anybody who has like a CPAP machine or has any kind of medical equipment where they need unfiltered water, so they'll have these jugs. You can also go on the Nextdoor app, which I used last year twice, once with great success. And the trick was, the one that wasn't successful was I asked the day after recycling day. So if you're going to ask on Nextdoor, ask a day or two before recycling day, and then those people will gladly help you out. I ended up getting 14 containers, including that one, from just asking my neighbors. And yes, I had to drive around their houses to pick it up, but I mean, they left them on the porch. So really, even though that was pre-COVID, that really wasn't any more, I had just about as much exposure as I would want to have even during the COVID crisis. And then, the third option, sort of the nuclear option that you may not want to take unless you have no choice, is you can get containers in a pinch for really cheap from places like Aldi's. Like, they have 1 gallon bottles, a water bottle or water jugs, right? That are like 89 cents each. Or sometimes they're on sale for cheaper than that. And so if you really are in a pinch and you need to have something like that, you can always go to a place like Aldi's and just get a few cheap ones. And the good news is that water, I had to do that a couple times at the beginning because I hadn't figured out where to source my materials from. And the good news is that I used the water in those bottles both to drink and also to moisten the soil before I made my, filled the containers with soil, because you are going to have to moisten your soil before you fill your containers with that potting soil. All right. So I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you have some good ideas. And if I missed anything or didn't cover anything, or if you have suggestions of what's worked well for you, I'd love to hear it and why. So please comment. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And please consider subscribing if you aren't already. The next episode I'm about to put out is about what other materials you need to do your winter sowing process, in addition to your jugs. And I hope you check back in. And otherwise, I will see you next time.